eBay steering wheels are something both loved and hated in the car community, and they're something that are mostly hated on. Can you trust the eBay steering wheel in your car? If you get one, will it flex like a rubber band? Well, I bought one and I installed it so we could find out. Also, I'm going to do a flex test with this eBay steering wheel that cost me $33 against a genuine Momo steering wheel to see how the flex compares between the two. You're watching Cashed Out Cars, and today we're reviewing a cheap eBay steering wheel. The wheel I bought is this deep dish wheel that's wrapped in black vinyl with red stitching and a red center mark. It has black spokes and it came with the hub adapter, horn button, and everything that I needed to hook up the horn for a grand total of $33 shipped. Let's start out with the easy part, the looks. So this steering wheel, to be completely honest, actually looks quite good, and I posted pictures of this in different Miata groups, and people were asking me how my insert name brand steering wheel that cost me $200 here cost. And to be honest, that did sort of surprise me because this is a cheap wheel and I figured people would be able to identify it as one. But then again, since it has the nice stitching, it has a fairly nice look to it since it has vinyl, so it looks like leather. And there's nothing about the wheel that really sticks out as a super ricey, super cheap wheel that's a piece of garbage. I get where people are coming from. So the stitching on this wheel does look quite nice. The center mark also is pretty good. I will say that's a little bit off center, but I'll touch on that again later once I talk about the quality of the wheel. And all in all, the wheel actually looks quite good. Now, if you look very closely, you could see that there are some slight imperfections in how the wheel was cut out, and it's not perfectly smooth, but for a wheel this cheap, it does look very nice. In terms of the hub and the shroud that it came with, those aren't quite so nice. Now, that's not to say that they look horrible, because the shroud is really just here to cover up the hub, and it is a little bit short for a Miata, but all in all, that doesn't look horrible. It was just a little bit warped since it's a cheap piece of plastic. And the hub also didn't look great. The casting didn't look like it was fantastic quality, but with a cheap part like that, the casting just needs to be strong. It doesn't need to look good, and it is covered up by that shroud and you'll never really see it. So in terms of looks for that stuff, I'm not overly concerned, and the look of the wheel was quite nice. Now that you have an idea of how this $33 wheel looks, let's go over how it feels. And this wheel actually feels pretty good in your hands. Now, like I said, it is vinyl, it's not leather. So the actual feel of the vinyl on there is a little bit slippery, and if your hands sweat, it gets even more slippery. Now, if it was leather, it would be a little bit softer and a little bit better to the touch, but for $33, you get what you pay for, and you get vinyl, which is a little bit slippery, but it's really not that bad. Now, there is a thin layer of something that's sort of a soft touch underneath the vinyl, so it's not like you're gripping onto a rock. Overall, it's not quite as premium feeling as a Momo wheel that has suede or something that's actually leather, but for what it is, I'm quite happy with it, and I don't really have any complaints about the feel or the hand position. The hands are pretty much positioned at 9 and 3, maybe just a tiny bit above, but it's a very usable, livable wheel that does feel pretty good for that price. Now we'll get into more what you're probably wondering about. How is the quality of these parts, and can you trust them? Now, I will say that you need to make this decision on your own, and don't make it solely based on what I say, but based on this wheel so far and having installed it and driven around on it for a couple weeks now, I would say that the quality really isn't that bad, and it's not atrocious like everybody talks about. Now, the first thing that I will say is that the bolt pattern in the steering wheel did not perfectly match up with the hub, and I had to use a file to basically oval out the holes in the steering wheel to get it to mate up with the hub. This isn't something that I was overly concerned about because it was just a really small tweak, so it's not like I removed tons of material and the wheel won't be structural anymore, but it was something that is a little bit of extra work versus paying for a nice wheel. In terms of the actual wheel, the quality is pretty good. We're going to get into a flex test shortly, but the actual quality of the wheel is decent. There is a little bit of imperfections around the edges of the spokes where it looks like they didn't like fully sand everything down, so you could see a little bit of jagged edges where they cut it or something. But other than that, in terms of the wheel, it's all fairly good quality. Moving into the hub, like I said, the casting wasn't very pretty, but as far as I could tell, it's strong. I put a lot of force into it, twisting it both ways, and it didn't break, and we're gonna get into flex pretty soon, so stay tuned. Another downside that I briefly mentioned is that centering mark on the wheel isn't really centered, and that's something that does bother me quite a bit, because after having a centering mark on my old wheel, I realized that I actually rely on it a little bit now. And having that off just a couple degrees is a bit distracting, and it's sort of weird not having a centering mark actually line up with center. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind when buying this wheel, is there might be small annoyances like that that aren't going to be perfect like if you bought a high dollar wheel. The first thing that I would do when you get this wheel is swap out your hardware for a higher strength fastener that will definitely keep your wheel in place and will not shear off or break. Now, the fasteners that this came with were actually two different kinds. One kind was a countersink head that was actually a fairly good quality fastener, and it was marked on there. These silver ones aren't marked at all, and these are the ones that I'm worried about, and these are the ones that I'm going to swap out as soon as possible. So now it's time to go over a major complaint that I always see talked about these eBay wheels, and that is how much they flex. Now, before I go ahead and try to flex this, I will say that I felt tons of really high quality wheels, because I worked on spec Miatas, and I was literally driving like 12 to 14 different spec Miatas just around the paddock last summer and the summer before that, and they all had pretty high dollar wheels, so I know what a decent wheel feels like. Now, this wheel actually feels pretty good for what it is. For that money, it doesn't really flex too much. Now right here, I'm just pressing forward and backwards on where you would put your hands during normal driving, and I'm not gonna lie to you and say it doesn't flex. It does flex a little bit, but compared to the OEM wheel that you're looking at the flex test of right now, it's really not that much more when your hands are at this position. Now, when you put your hand up here, there's a lot less support because the spokes don't extend up that way. And that's where you start to see the flex on this wheel. Now, I could sit there and bend it quite a bit. This is putting a decent amount of effort in, and it does bend some up there, once again because it's not supported. Now, here's where this video gets very interesting. As you just saw, the eBay wheel did flex a decent amount, and it's probably more than you thought it should have flexed. Now, this is a genuine Momo Mod 78 wheel that my brother has in his 944, and let's go ahead and give this a flex test too. I'm going to put about the same amount of force into it than I was on the eBay wheel. So as you can see, even a genuine Momo wheel has a moderate amount of flex to it, and the eBay wheel isn't significantly more than this. So to wrap this part of this video up, this wheel isn't rock solid, but it's also not a rubber band like a lot of people say that it is. Now, you could, of course, flex the wheel a little bit when your hands are at the normal positions, and if you're going up here, you could flex it even more. But under normal driving conditions, you're not going to be pushing the wheel in and out, and you're not going to be going like this while you're driving. So all in all, it's not really that much of a concern. Now, if you were a Mercedes F1 driver and you had your special DAS system, you would be pushing your wheel in and out, but you're not. So you really don't have to worry about it under normal driving conditions, and even most performance driving conditions. You're not going to be pushing forwards and backwards on the wheel. You're going to be putting torque on it to rotate it because, well, that's what a steering wheel does. Also, you did see that the stock wheel had a little bit of flex in it, and even a genuine Momo wheel has some flex forwards and backwards because of that. So to wrap up, would I recommend a very cheap eBay steering wheel? And quite honestly, if you're on a very tight budget and you don't mind something that's not the absolute highest quality, I think it's a decent option. Now, what I will say is for the $33, you could pick one up, try it out, mount it up on your car and see how you like it. And then if you don't like it, you could take it off and have a good sort of sim wheel setup or a nice thing to hang on your wall that looks good, even if it doesn't perform absolutely flawlessly. If you're building a real race car or a true drift car that you're absolutely going to be hammering on all the time and that you might want an absolutely solid wheel, this probably isn't the way that you should go, and you should know that before you start building your race car and your drift car anyway. So all in all, to wrap up, this is a pretty decent option if you're on a budget. It's not absolutely perfect. There are obviously things that could be done better if you buy a name brand, high performance, high dollar wheel. But for what you pay for one of these wheels, it's really not all too bad. So with all that said, would you trust an eBay wheel? And for all of you that have ran them in your cars, how do you like them? That's gonna wrap up this video. Please like it if you liked it, leave any comments you have down below, and subscribe for the next one. Take care.